This week, Paul and I interviewed Joe Garcia, Global Corporate Solutions Engineer at CyberArk. In the news, Venmo caught publishing users' transactions, Facebook investigates yet another data firm, and when to purchase a solution to your cybersecurity problems. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. Layered Insight is the industry's first embedded security approach for containers. Trusted by Global 1000 enterprises to secure their containerized applications, it's the only solution that requires no root privileges, has zero dependency on the underlying infrastructure, and is fully portable across any container environment. Unify DevOps and SecOps, enabling the rapid development of containerized applications without worrying about security. To learn more, please visit layeredinsight.com/ASW. Rapid7 powers the practice of SecOps. Using shared data, analytics, and automated workflows, SecOps unites IT, DevOps, and security teams to make security an outcome of innovation. Rapid7 combines technology, expertise, and advocacy to drive vulnerability management, application security, incident detection, and log management for more than 7,000 organizations worldwide. Power up your SecOps practice with a free trial at rapid7.com/securityweekly. Hard-coded credentials can be trouble, but not as much trouble as a vulnerable DevOps environment. If you want protection without the hassle of security slowing you down, CyberArk, the #1 provider in privileged access security, has the solution for you. With CyberArk Conjur, developers can easily secure secrets across any DevOps toolchain or platform, whether your application runs in the cloud or on premises. Eliminate the headaches of managing secrets and try Conjur open source for free with no strings attached. Visit conjur.org/ASW to get started today.
Welcome everyone to episode 25, our 26th episode of Application Security Weekly. I am, of course, your host, Keith Hoodlet, and I'm excited to be joined once again by my illustrious co-host, Paul Asadorian. Hey Paul, how's it going?
Hey Keith, how's it going? I'm doing really well. I'm using my Remarkable tablet, like literally
That's right.
The Remarkable. Still trying to figure out how that fits. I just like it for taking notes. During the show and for all the interviews and stuff. They by no means endorse us or the show in any way, shape, form, or fashion. We just happen to be nerds and pick up this technology. Keith has one as well.
That's right.
I'm digging it so far. I like it. So
the one thing I found about it, and I'm not going to go into this too much. I mean, here's my Remarkable tablet as well. But I found that I use it so much that I have to charge it on a pretty regular basis. That's the only downside is that I just use it too much, which is not necessarily a bad thing. A couple of quick announcements before we actually jump into our interview with Joe. So we just released our 2018 listener survey. So please go to securityweekly.com/survey to help us continue to provide you with quality content that doesn't break the build. Also, come to the Pool Cabana at Black Hat and DEF CON, so that's Mandalay Bay and Caesars, to pick up a free copy of the Cyber Hero Adventures comic. And then you'll also be able to get a couple of comic books signed by Gary Berman himself, the author. So definitely check that out. Paul, I know that you're going to be out there all week with cast and crew, if I'm not mistaken, yeah?
Yeah, we'll actually have the most people from Security Weekly at Black Hat and DEF CON than ever before. In past shows have grown so much I realize I need help for a lot of activities. So just to quickly break it down, for those of you who will be at Black Hat and or DEF CON, Black Hat will be in the pool area at Mandalay Bay, where we will be doing briefings with analyst briefings, essentially, where Security Weekly now plays the role of the analyst in our business today. So we'll be doing briefings in the pool area. I thought that was an appropriate place to do some briefings. We'll also be doing the trivia series of mini interviews, primarily Dougie Fresh, Doug White, Dr. Doug White. He's got a lot of nicknames, Dougie Nipples. He'll be there doing the trivia portion of all of those, that series of interviews, which are just free interviews that we do with community and industry alike. And it's fun hacker movie trivia. I'll probably come up with a new category for this year for trivia questions. We will also be on the Black Hat show floor doing some coverage there, which is probably a good opportunity to use my Remarkable tablet to take notes as I do ad hoc briefings and just kind of get a feel for what's happening in the industry side of things in the security world at Black Hat. And then at DEF CON, we will be in the pool area at Caesar's Palace. There, the mission is to record our regular shows, try and get as many segments recorded of our regular shows as possible. And then in the vendor area at DEF CON, we will be selling T-shirts, Security Weekly shot glasses, and computer glasses. They're kind of like knockoff gunner glasses. And we'll have that stuff to give away at Black Hat to select individuals. And we'll also be the exclusive distributor of that comic book, which is awesome for raising awareness about and training for cybersecurity issues. Gary's told me some interesting things. The print quality is awesome, so if you're into comic books, you're definitely going to want to check one out. And there's all new storylines being built into this one. And one of the storylines, the hero is female and goes on to promote our industry and encourage STEM and things like that. So there's a lot of interesting things happening on the Security Weekly front. A lot of reasons. I mean, just came out and come say hi at the pool area, take a break from the show, and just come hang out with us. We're talking about launching cigar conversations at this year's show as well. I'll probably formalize that in the next couple of weeks, where I'll sit down with someone, we'll have a cigar together. They will ask me cigar questions, and I will ask them security questions, and we'll do all kinds of interesting pairings and such. So a lot happening for us at the upcoming Hacker Summer Camp.
That sounds like a lot of fun. In my case, I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to be making it out. I'm on the fence as to whether or not I want to just come out for just DEF CON that week, so the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and probably leave on Sunday. So still up in the air, kind of planning it out, thinking about finances and stuff, because I got another conference I want to go to in October, and so just trying to kind of make up my mind about that. But in the meantime, I do want to introduce our guest today, Joe Garcia from CyberArk. He is a global corporate solutions engineer, has a strong background in DevOps, cloud, and security, and is currently focused on helping customers implement and scale effective secrets management solutions. Just a little bit of his background. He has security operations administration focused on vulnerability and monitoring solutions at Raymond James Financial in his past, and has dealt with everything from data automation from the Qualys Cloud all the way down to producing comprehensive metrics in Tableau for the division. He is a CISSP and a certified AWS technical professional. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Keith. It's glad to be here, and glad I could make it to the show just in time before Black Hat. I'll be traveling out there too. Maybe I'll see you guys out there if you can make it, Keith. Paul will be there, though, I'm sure.
I will be there.
Oh yeah, you can't miss Paul. He's got a tactical fanny pack that he's going to be wearing, and he's pretty. You'll notice him when you see him.
It's a satchel, okay? It's a satchel. Indiana Jones carried a satchel, okay?
I'm sorry, I just had to mention.
No wrestlers will disagree with you on that, okay? I think they still carry them around to today, the fanny packs and stuff. But as long as it's tactical, I think that makes it okay for Black Hat's show floor at least.
I mean, it all really depends if it's camouflage or not, or leather. I don't know which. But I did want to jump into a little bit about CyberArk Conjure. I know that Paul had an incident at one point with some of his Docker repositories and kind of spinning up malicious Docker containers as well, which doesn't necessarily tie directly into Conjure as secrets management. But for our listeners, what is secrets management, and why does anybody care, or why does anybody need it?
Well, the funny thing is that people do actually care about secrets management. I think the issue is how to actually approach it. We've got a lot of DevOps specific tools, that are out there that have their own sort of vaulting systems internal to these tools. But when it comes to the actual management portion, they don't talk to each other. So you'll have a pipeline with maybe 5 or 6 different tools in place. But if I'm talking to, for instance, Jenkins and credentials that I have stored there, which could get to be quite a bit, knowing Jenkins, and then I kind of flip over to Ansible Tower Vault and take a look there, they're not communicating with each other to keep these credentials in sync. This is really the biggest benefit that Conjure can provide to an entire environment, is centralizing the secrets as well as the auditing events surrounding those secrets, but allowing us to now add management to it on top of that. And we can start rotating these credentials without worries of breaking the pipeline, because we're treating secrets as a service at this point. So we're expecting these applications to come to us at the time that they need them, get whatever that value is for the secret, utilize it in its pipeline. And as long as we're rotating it on the back end, who cares, who has what, because they're all coming to us as a service at the end of the day. And that's really the crux behind Conjur when it comes to secrets management.
So it's almost like a password vault or a password management solution for all of your secrets for service accounts, for cloud environments, your automated tools such as build tools or scanning tools. Is that maybe an accurate kind of comparison to like password management? But in this case, it does the auto rotation for you as well as, of course, passing these out as things make requests.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's you're 110% correct. That's exactly what we're trying to solve here. But we built Conjur with a little different idea in place because we learned from the lessons of the past. And we knew going forward that, we could build something that was very developer focused, but at the end of the day, we're not just talking about developers here. We're talking about sometimes executives or business owners. We're talking about security now that we need to bring into the fold. DevOps is developers and operations separately at one point, but we can marry them together. But if we're talking on an enterprise level, which we're really focused on and we really cater to the most, we also have to think about auditing and oversight. We can't just throw code at automation now and expect it just to do what it's doing blindly. We need to make sure that there's no malicious intent included in injecting or poisoning these different scripts that automation is running too. So we need to keep an active eye on what's going on. So it's not just a secrets management layer, it's also an auditing layer too that we're putting into place to make sure that we have complete visibility across the board from end to end of your pipeline.
So from an auditing perspective, what are some of the things that you take away from the metrics that you gather that you're able to then deduce that there's malicious behavior? Like what sort of things are you performing? Is it like scanning of the container images? Is it auditing of an AMI? Like what sort of functionality or features exist to allow you to do that auditing?
Yeah, so we're more concerned about the privileged access than we are from a container perspective, where we're taking a hash of the container and then checking back in to make sure that the hash hasn't changed. I think that's some of our alliance members like Twistlock and Aqua Security. They do something like that from a containers perspective.
I just want to throw.
We're more concerned.
I want to selfishly throw Layered Insight into that mix because they sponsor the show. Yeah.
Oh, my bad. You think I would have got that? They were your first ad. You think I would have caught off to that? But
they were. But yeah, you're right. The container security is about analyzing the container, but also managing the security of your containers. And what I understand Conjur does is help me with my secrets management problem, which is separate from that, which is, yeah, I find it interesting, Joe and Keith in our audience, right? When we talk about application security, as we've done for all of these episodes, this is episode 25, we talk about the major issues, right? Securing the SDLC, securing your open source libraries and all these other major problems, scanning somehow your applications in various ways. The problem that I think a lot of organizations are overlooking is managing your secrets from your app. We have an internal application that we wrote locally, and we have this problem big time, right? And it's with API keys. And it's how do you manage and protect your API keys when you're in a full agile and DevOps style environment? That gets extremely challenging if you don't have some or implementing some kind of vault.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, it all boils down to just keeping everything centrally managed and centrally audited. It becomes a difficulty when you have, possibly up to 10 different applications within your pipeline, and you're just trying to push out one product. Yet, in order to detect a compromise, you need to look at 10 different logs in order to figure that out. It just doesn't make sense to me if I'm following a DevOps methodology, right? So if I understand the DevOps methodology completely, it's to make things faster, simpler, scalable, things like that. And Conjur kind of fits into all of those modes because we're the one-stop shop to figure all that information out, and we can combine it all together, send it off to a SIEM if that's your flavor of choice, or we can contain it within our own container, and you can utilize the reporting functionality out of there. So there's a lot of different angles that we can play in order to make sure that you guys got visibility into what's going on from an automation standpoint, because it's definitely time consuming to do it to each of the individual tools that you may have scattered across your pipeline.
Well, and Joe's right. It can get to be messy very fast. And anytime you're dealing with credentials, when you talk about having a mess, it can be a very risky mess, right? And what ends up happening is, as we see from a lot of the news headlines, is your key to something, in most cases, is in your public repository or in some kind of backup, or ends up exposed somehow to an attacker. And I think you can greatly limit that by, as Joe is saying, centralizing all of your secrets. And it gives you that level of protection, right? I mean, still, your application has to use it in some capacity. So there are some vulnerabilities along the chain, but by managing those, you can gain visibility into where some of those credentials might be abused.
So I had a follow-up question as well. So if I'm a developer and I want to make use of this, vault for all of my secrets needs, am I calling it via an API, or how am I authenticated to make requests of Conjur in the first place as a developer? And then once I'm authenticated, how would I actually make use of it in my code?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's a great question. And it's obviously, so it's a question that there's a lot of different answers to, depending on the persona that we're talking about. Because we did, develop it with 4 different of those personas in mind. But we definitely took the developer side of things and made sure that we didn't disrupt their workflow at all. So there are client libraries available that wrap our API for most of the popular languages that are out there, but they would be accessing it through an API for the most part. We do provide a command line interface for the operations type people who love to sit at their terminal, and we also have a user interface as well. But the developers tend to stick with the API and those client libraries. And we deal with a lot of different authentication types. So it honestly depends on what you have working in your environment. One of my favorites is to utilize our authenticator for Kubernetes, since container orchestration seems to be the way that things are going, especially Kubernetes. And we've developed an authenticator that can strictly use attributes. So there's no initial bearer token. There's no secret zero. We're not passing API keys around. We're actually using the Kubernetes API in order to verify that what we're seeing come in is actually true from the security admin's perspective. So it's very powerful to keep those secrets from floating around your environment while still keeping the security in place that you would expect from a company like CyberArk, where we're not really divulging the entire world to what it is that you're trying to protect.
So, Joe, how does, if you're deploying new containers, how do you use the authentication scheme to, let's say, authenticate something to the registry, right? Because, I mean, in the process, when you want to spin up a new container, you're going to need access to the registry either to push something in or pull something out. So how does that authentication work?
Yeah, so typically we're talking about more automated identities, which Conjur was really built to deal with. Mm-hmm. And we actually consider it a concept of machine identity, where we're taking anything that's non-human. We're not classifying it as an application or as this or that. We're just saying a machine. Anything that's not human, we can grant an identity to with a role-based access approach to it, and allow them to then obtain an identity that we trust. Once they have that identity, from there, they can call into us as much as they want. And as long as they're authorized within Conjur to access the secrets, we'll go ahead and hand them back. Now, the delivery, I think, is the part of the question that you're really asking about. And we've got open source utilities out there, one of which is called Summon, that you can find on GitHub. And that will actually, I call Summon a hugger a little bit. It's a process that likes to wrap and hug another sub-process. So let's say I was trying to run a JavaScript, or Docker, for example, would be another one, which is exactly what you're talking about, right? Docker login would be that command. I can use Summon in order to pull, using the identity that I've established on my host, the secrets back and inject them into that sub-process as an environment variable. So we're still sticking to what developers are working towards. They're trying to use their secrets in environment variables. whether you're bringing it in from a manifest or another secret store, we're trying to keep that same workflow in place. So they would, at the end of the day, just be using those environment variables, but we would still have the auditing and insight from a Conjure perspective and a security perspective to be able to answer any questions that were asked about that access and that authorization.
And as we move to more serverless technologies, is Conjure still something that folks are using? And are you running into like competition with whoever your serverless provider is, like Amazon? Like, don't they have their own kind of store? Like, what are the advantages to having it internally?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Amazon just introduced their secrets manager, which, initially when I was reading through the articles and stuff, I thought, well, great for AWS only users. Like, what about everybody else and other cloud services? But it seems like they kind of built it in a way to where it could extend there. It's just not quite there yet. They just announced it. Conjure comes provided as it's cloud agnostic. It doesn't care what cloud you're in. All that Conjure wants to do is be able to talk back to its master in its cluster, and it's a happy camper. That master could live on-prem, in a cloud, whatever. It just needs the service exposed for it to be able to communicate with its little worker bees that are out and about serving the secrets to applications.
So it's better to have to set up Conjure and have that central repository, one central repository that you manage. Even though there's risk in keeping all of your secrets in one central repository, there's also huge benefits to that. And Keith and I were just talking, I think, last week about your source code being in the same boat. Like, you want to have one source code repository, you want to have one secrets manager. And even though it can be kind of the perspective of it might be more insecure to have everything all in one place, on the flip side of that, having everything in one place means you secure one thing, you monitor one thing, and security-wise, you're in a better position by centrally managing your secrets or your source code repository.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so at the crux of everything, we utilize security policy as code. And even further, it's YAML formatted. So it's easily readable by machines and humans. But even further to that point, we keep all of the secret values, even the map to the keys of the kingdom, out of that policy. So we can check it into GitHub publicly and call it a day and not have any worries about exposing our secrets. And this is really what should be replacing what you were talking about earlier, where people are accidentally putting plain text keys and things into GitHub repositories. They should be replacing that with our policy as code, which can go in there and just give you the namespace in Conjure that it's located. And we can start to clean things up that way. Conjure itself even does this and makes it publicly available so that anybody can see an example of what we're utilizing internally, because there's no fear from our part. There's no secrets in there. We're just establishing those namespaces and nothing else.
And that, I think this is kind of akin to encryption, right? Where, sure, you could try and write your own encryption algorithm, but it's way better to use an already established framework or an already established and tested method. Because I see developers today, they're storing secrets in config files, they're storing secrets in the database, and there's a lot more code at the end of the day that you're going to have to write to try and manage all those secrets, whereas if you just store them centrally, that code's already written for you. You're just calling it in a wrapper, like you're saying, Joe. I think that's a huge use case to your developers to say, you get to write less code. I mean, despite what you think about developers and sysadmins, we really don't like to type. Like, we're really lazy about typing. The less we have to type, the better.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And I mean, I just had a bunch of talks. We just got back from our security conference with CyberArk in Boston this past week, and I had a lot of great talks with a lot of our customers. And some of them are, pretty embedded with Pivotal, and they're deploying applications out to Cloud Foundry. And I'm like, look, you can use our authenticator, and we try to cater to the developer's workflow. They're already using plain text secrets in their manifest files. Let's just move that out into what someone can read. Take away the hard-coded part of it, replace it with where to find it in Conjure, and now your developers really didn't do anything but kind of separate a file into two, and we've secured what they're doing behind Conjure. It's a pretty simple thing to do, and I think that if you approached a developer with that in mind, like with that, few tasks in mind, I don't see why they would ever balk at the idea of getting a little bit of security around their stuff, especially if it makes it easier for them at the end of the day.
And what's really nice about this, from everything I can see here out on GitHub is that there's actually an open source repo for Conjure for people to go and try it out. Can you talk a little bit about that at all in terms of like how it works, or maybe what limitations are between this and those companies that eventually want to go and purchase licensing to Conjure?
Sure, yeah. So we are available on GitHub, but I would have to say after today, the easiest way of getting your hands on our Conjure open source is with the announcement of the Google Cloud Marketplace. We are one of the first security companies to be introduced into the Google Cloud Marketplace, and now we're just a one-click deploy away to being deployed into your Google Kubernetes engine on the Google Cloud Platform. So this is huge, and we even allow you the ability to bring in a remote Postgres database. So if you wanted to bring secrets from an on-prem open source version of Conjure into Kubernetes, you can just connect it back with that. But either way that you go, you're going to get all of the benefits of our Conjure Enterprise Edition, with the exception of our LDAP integration, our user interface, as well as rotation of our secrets. So other than those three things, well, support as well, typical enterprise stuff there. But, other than those four things, I should say, you're getting everything that you need to be able to create your own Conjure cluster today. It would just take a little load balancing from your part. And if you're using Google Cloud Platform and GKE already, that has a built-in load balancer you can work with. So you're off to the races.
Got it. And the rotation part is the thing, to my mind, the thing that's most important, right? Like, so that's all the more reason for companies to consider buying it. But at the very least, if there's a concern with that today, a developer can go out, try it, prove that it works, and say, look, now we can add password rotation, security team. Do you want us to add password rotation for all of our secrets that we're using for all of our cloud infrastructure? The answer will always be yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if they're a current CyberArk customer and they're just hearing about Conjure today, we have a synchronizer that can bring our secrets from our enterprise password vault into Conjure. And we can utilize the past 15 years of rotators that we've created for our enterprise password vault to rotate credentials and then synchronize them down to Conjure. So, we may only have, around 10 of those rotators in Conjure today, but if you're a current CyberArk customer, that increases to over 150 very quickly.
Awesome. So what else is CyberArk up to these days? It sounds like you have some new integrations and some new things that you guys are actually working on as well, beyond Conjure, obviously.
Before we get to that, I just have I had one last question on the operations side. When it comes to implementing Conjure, Joe, do you find that the operations team is implementing it? Is it the dev team? Is it a collaborative effort? Like, where does that fall in the organization today?
Oh, this is a fun answer. Okay, so man, I wish there was a normal answer for you too. We actually see it a little differently. What we're finding is that the security teams are approaching us as they're nearing going to prod with a lot of this stuff. So the security teams will approach us, but it seems to me at the end of the day that the development teams and those DevOps teams, it's kind of half and half developers and then actually established DevOps that are having the final say on what is purchased. From a security perspective, which is mind-blowing to me coming from InfoSec and a SOC team, I was so used to being that person that was the decision maker at the end of the day as to where we went. So it kind of, I'm glad that that wall between developers and operations has split and, they're together on one side, but I feel like we just created a new wall between DevOps and security. And that's kind of where we're at today. We need to figure out how to break down this wall and then have everybody just collaborate together. And that's really what Conjure is trying to establish here with the idea of our personas as well as the idea around our security policy as code. We're trying to bring collaboration in where developers can send to security what it is they hope their authorizations are, maybe in like a PR request or something like that. Security can review it and then kind of make what they say. And we can start acting like a team instead of trying to act like we're against each other, which we're absolutely not. Yeah, especially, at least from the security side of the fence. I haven't been on the DevOps side of the fence quite yet, but I can imagine that the sentiment is the same there as well.
Yeah, I can see security come up with more use cases for Conjure, right, in different points. And I think it exists in code, but also in that blending of the development and operations in DevOps, right? I can see teams using it for the operational aspect as well. How do I gain access to our AWS or Google Cloud, and how do I rotate those keys, and how do I, you mentioned Ansible before. I mean, that's a huge use case for some kind of centralized vault.
Yeah, and I think Ansible is the worst offender of privileged credentials, or at least keys, right?
Big time.
That's out there from a DevOps perspective. Probably second to, I would imagine, Jenkins, because Jenkins needs everything from end to end, from build and test all the way down to deploy or deliver, right? And that's a lot of secrets that we need to treat this automation like our human users of the past. We used to segregate departments, segregate duties, yet now we're just like, yeah, just give them all the secrets. And it's like, hold on a sec. When did we start not segregating duties, even though it's automation? I get that. I think people are missing the point here.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great insight. Sorry, Keith, back to you.
All right. No, it's okay. Actually, I was going to say, unless you had any additional questions, I'm ready for the Application Security Weekly 5 questions if you are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. All right, Joe, first and foremost, what were the specs like on your first computer?
You hear me laughing hard, so it wasn't very good. Oh, man, my first computer was actually my aunt's computer, and it was a compact, i386 or something like. Unfortunately, I don't have the tenure of some people coming on here with, like, I had the Commodore and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a compact 386 was my first computer that I learned Visual Basic 4 on. So that was a good time.
Oh man, you already skipped to the next question, which is what was the programming language that you learned first? So no, it's good.
That was like a developer making efficient code, right? He answered 2 questions in one. That was super efficient. Exactly. That was awesome.
So let me ask this then: what do you enjoy writing in today? If you still do any coding at all in your free time?
Oh man, had you asked me about 6 months ago, before I joined, really got involved with Conjure and DevOps and stuff like that, I would have said PowerShell right off the bat. I mean, I even went as far as trying to write PowerShell PowerShell core with Linux SQL container, something crazy like that. Today, I would have to say that my favorite is Python. It's just so extensible, and there's so many modules out there that I can do things so easily for. Plus, I mean, everybody's got Ansible or something that runs in Python today, so I found that it converts really easily to trying to fix a lot of the problems I find in tools today as well.
So then this next question will be especially relevant. Tabs or spaces?
Oh my gosh, I'm having flashbacks to Silicon Valley right now when he broke up with his girlfriend. So I am definitely a spaces guy. I was a tabs guy, and then I realized that I am switching from Bash to YAML to all these different things so much. I just like the control of spaces so that I can, double space if it's YAML, space 4 times if it's Bash. And that I'm a control freak when it comes to that, I guess you could say.
Well, so it's funny because I'm the same way.
Yeah, I think you're a tabs person until tabs really burn you. And I got burned really early on in my career as a sysadmin when I realized that older versions of Solaris treat the tab totally differently and munge the config file. And ever since then, I was like, screw tabs. This is horrible. I just spent 6 hours of my life debugging something because I use a tab and not spaces, right?
I think a better question would be, are you a semicolons guy or no semicolons guy? Because the PHP semicolons used to burn me all the time, like back in the earlier versions where they wouldn't even give you any information as to what happened. And I would spend hours trying to find, the lone missing semicolon. So that's actually my most hated out of all of the languages.
At some point I have to add that, and then the other question will be brace inline or on the next line, like on its own new line. That'll be another one entirely, but we won't go there today.
Many arguments over that too. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a good one.
So then my next question though is actually a holy war: Vim or Emacs?
Okay, so everybody at my job is going to kill me, but I am totally Vim. I've tried Emacs, and I just can't grok it. I can't. I don't have enough time to sit there and try to learn everything. But I will tell you the presentations that I've seen in Emacs is mind-blowing, and I wish I knew it. So I'll give them that.
You're in good company. It's fine. We're both Vim users here, so you're fine. So, last question. What topic or who would you nominate that we bring on the show to interview on a future episode?
Oh, that's a great question. I love Rachel Toback. I love her at DEF CON every year in the social engineering village. I think last year she basically like owned Sony's knock, and it was just the greatest thing I've ever witnessed. It was my first DEF CON, my first time seeing any social engineering live. And I think that the hardest part of the social engineering village isn't so much compromising the companies that you're set up for, but trying to keep quiet because you're laughing so hard because you can't believe that they got this far with this company and stuff. And so her, I don't know if she's ever been on before or on this show, but like just in general, out of all of the shows that I watch, it would definitely be her. As far as this specific show, though, man, oh gosh. I know that Kosuke with Jenkins and CloudBees was the one who created the credential plugin for Jenkins, and it's also the crux to their security for CloudBees. So I would love to hear how about him developing that credential plugin and how it became the centerpiece to all of their security there at CloudBees, and what his initial thoughts were when creating it and how it kind of evolved to what it is today. I think that would be an interesting interview.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, with that, Joe, thank you so much for appearing on Application Security Weekly. We will come back with the news in just a moment.
Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ASW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Welcome back, everyone, to Application Security Weekly. I could suddenly hear myself there in the background for some reason. Anyway, Paul, a lot of news going on this week.
Keith, what is that in your water bottle you're drinking? Is that whiskey? Hold that up for the audience.
This is
definitely
actually
whiskey. It's whiskey.
It's not whiskey. It's actually green tea. So I drink Crystal Light peach green tea during the days. Though if you catch me on Paul Security Weekly, that glass that you see is in fact whiskey. Yes. So this is not whiskey.
It looks like whiskey.
You know, every now and then I get on a work call and I worry a little bit about drinking from my water bottle just for exactly that reason. Because in my mind, I'm like, people are going to think this is whiskey. It's not whiskey.
Or urine. You know. One of the two.
Yeah, I lost a bet and, here we are.
You can drink it once. That's it. Once is the... So if you're ever stranded in the woods or in the middle of the ocean, you can drink your own urine once. That's a friendly tip for our listeners. You can look it up. Science backs it up. Just once.
Paul's probably tried this. He believes
I have not tried it. No.
Testing model.
I have not tried it, but there was
duly noted.
It's a long story. Someone in my extended family, there were stories of. Anyway.
Moving on. Paul, what news did you want to start with this week? There was a pretty bad Oracle patch that came out.
Let's talk about Oracle. I mean, here's what I don't understand, Keith. And I'm just going to kind of go out on a limb, right? We looked at Equifax, right? And a lot of major organizations that are using Oracle in some capacity, and typically it manifests itself into some kind of custom web application, usually written in Java and usually running JBoss or Jakarta, or what was Equifax running? I always blank on.
Struts too.
Struts, thank you. But which is that's more of like a framework, right? For Java. And so we see organizations implementing Oracle. We know that they don't necessarily patch Oracle all the time because of a whole host of reasons that we've covered on various segments in webcasts on business critical applications. But what I found, what was striking to me when I look at the Oracle, the Equifax case, in a lot of similar cases to that, is that many of the traditional development teams that are developing these business critical applications that are using Oracle and using things, like the Java frameworks, aren't doing DevOps, dude. And so patching becomes this like heinous thing that we've struggled with for so long. If they were to move in the DevOps direction, the newer versions of Oracle or whatever web framework you're using are automatically getting tested organically in your process. And so you're able to keep these technologies up to date more easily. Now, I'm not going to pretend to believe I'm an expert in applying DevOps practices to these major, business critical applications that are using Oracle. There's obviously some challenges there, right? I mean, we've seen challenges with virtualization and cloud in that environment as well. Assuming we have similar, probably a whole host of other challenges getting DevOps into the mix. But the thing that strikes me the most, Keith, is that it can help solve the problem. I mean, this is one of the huge takeaways I got from DevOps was I don't have to get stuck with older, vulnerable versions of my operational infrastructure. And that's exactly what happens in the case when you're doing Oracle. And I don't know if you, Keith, have you looked at this technology and said, like, why or why not they're applying DevOps? Is it a culture thing? I think that ties into it, certainly, but there's other factors.
So in my mind, I think there are a number of companies that are doing DevOps that are, in fact, using Java as the main language. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, I don't think that they're using, or if they are using, they are readily testing frameworks, right? So Struts 2 being kind of the key example there, right? So in my mind, it comes back to good test-driven development, good unit testing, good integration testing, good regression testing, as you might call it, Paul, and then determining via build pipelines if, in fact, the application works the way it's supposed to. Now, that is all assuming that the company that is doing this, test writing has good code coverage. That's the other problem here.
Oh, I think you're right.
About, like for companies that have done, Java development for decades, they probably haven't been doing test-driven development, right? So now you got to ask them to write all these tests.
Their testing process takes months, right? And and if their development process and test processes and deployment processes aren't aligned, you can do DevOps all day long. If it still takes 2 months to run through all of your regression testing or your user acceptance testing, then your development process is stuck, and you're not going to make much headway to problems like this of updating your operational infrastructure. Because, let's face it, if you're going, I'm going to update my framework to the latest version in this next build cycle, and I'm going to update a bunch of code to support that change, that's going to take time. And then now I got to flip it over to my users and get some acceptance testing, which I think is usually a phase when you're in these larger business critical applications. I think it's certainly different from other kinds of development, such as I've got a public facing application that, I know I can run through my test cases more easily.
Yeah, and that comes back to the point that you're trying to make, Paul, which is a lot of these Java applications are compiled software that, someone has to go out and actually update or patch or whatever in the software itself, right? Like They're not just getting it served up to them on a web platform, which at the end of the day is, much more of a DevOps process than anything else.
And many are, and it's still hard because there's so much functionality baked into it. There's a lot of dependencies. There's a lot of integrations with that software, enterprise software, with other enterprise software. I mean, this software is hugely complex. I think it's I don't know why it's more challenging for this software versus, a younger company, not even a startup, that has a public-facing application that is their business. I feel like they're better poised to do that. Maybe because the software is newer and they don't have to worry about as much legacy. I think that certainly plays into it.
That's definitely a part of it. And that's not to say that there aren't platforms written in Java, right? There definitely are. And there are, microservices architectures associated with those applications. And those companies that have that tend to do pretty well, right? Like Java developers are pretty easy to find because every college under the sun still seems to teach it. But yeah, with this specific update, so that was story number 300, bugs, breaches, and more. It's 334 new security vulnerabilities. I wanted to call out that most of them, and these are like, the kind of risk matrix discussions that they have, are remotely exploitable without administrative access. And it's strongly encouraged, especially if you're using WebLogic, to go ahead and patch soon, because apparently the WebLogic bugs associated with this specific patch had a POC that was published on GitHub and are now actively being exploited in the wild by malicious actors.
Well, and here's the other thing. Covering updates from Oracle as an example for the past, almost 14 years now, they almost always release it as one big lump, like waterfall style development. Here's all your 300 patches. Like every time I've covered an Oracle patch cycle, it's not very often. And when you do get it, it's hundreds of patches. And that just is counterculture to the way DevOps is, teams are operating today. Whereas if you told me about those as we went, we could fix those as we go in our agile process and our DevOps process. And so I think there's a definite cultural disconnect here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of these for, let's see, which one was this? Because it was the Oracle Financial Services application. I highlighted as I was going through this that it is a fix for CVE 2014-3577.
And there you go.
Also addresses CVE 2015-5262. That is 4 and 3 years old, respectively. And they're just pushing patches for those vulnerabilities right now.
Yeah.
What? So, yeah. Oracle, for a lot of reasons, is not one of my favorite organizations, among other reasons because they write Java, and I'm not a huge fan of writing Java myself. But, yeah, basically remotely exploitable vulnerabilities without authentication almost everywhere. Something like, I don't know, some large number, I think it was in the hundreds of these are actually exploitable remotely. And it says it in the article itself. So that's just not good. Meanwhile, other companies, speaking of which, that are just doing not good things. Did you catch this Venmo article at all, Paul?
No, what is this about?
So Venmo is like a payment processor that you can use on your phone. You can send money between people and leave a little note or what have you.
I think I have seen that. Okay.
And so what ended up happening here was a researcher, and by a researcher I mean like someone that was doing collegiate research, right? Not like a security researcher. Basically tracked something like 200 million public Venmo transactions because the individual user's security settings are public by default. And it was this researcher was able to go ahead and look at all of the transactions, including monetary amounts sent between people based on their Venmo account, and the messages sent between those people. I just can't even. Like, I don't know what to say about this, Paul.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good situation at all.
Yeah, effectively, I mean, we have another article in here that we can talk about in a little while. But one of the things that this researcher speculates is that people like health insurers could grab this data and try to determine the habits of the individual based on what they're paying for. There was one individual in here that they specifically cited had 965 transactions for sodas, alcoholic drinks, fast food, and sweets in 8 months. So, of course, that person would be readily flagged as, being a health risk by an insurance organization. So, in my mind, it's just like, why publicize it, and why were you lazy about the fact that,
or that's just that's just grandma watching the grandkids,
fair, you make a good point. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was babysitting my niece and nephew this past weekend, and my wife and I were definitely that aunt and uncle giving them like whoopie pies and pizza, and,
right? Because you send them home to their parents, and you're like, good luck with them sleeping tonight.
The best part is we were actually at their place while they were out, so it's like we didn't even have to send them home. We just left.
Just slept. Like, I'm out. Like, they had like 6 whoopie pies each and 4 sodas. See ya.
Yep, exactly. It was, needless to say, we were there long enough for them to try and go to bed, and it was not pretty. We made a big mistake. So lessons learned.
It never is. Anyway, I think that kind of brings up the issues with, developers in understanding risk, right? And the whole process you put behind not just security, but the integrity of your application and making it resilient, and how much effort you put into that, and not understanding the threat models and the far-reaching repercussions of some type of incident. And that's a balance that everyone plays today when you're developing software. You're going to do those threat models, hopefully before, sometimes during, and then hopefully you don't have to do them after this occurs, right? And understand the far-reaching effects that the kind of unreliability of your software has presented.
Yeah, well, I mean, and talk about unreliable software, right? So I wanted to move on to story number 3. Facebook investigates a data firm called Crimson Hexagon for breaching their, end user license agreements or what have you, to go about hoovering up more data. Basically, in my mind, the story is the same thing as we saw with Cambridge Analytica and others. Facebook has API. Facebook allows API to grab private user data, including conversations, etc., and then company abuses that API. For some reason, at this point, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I look at this and every time I think to myself, Facebook is a global Fortune 100 company, probably like global Fortune 10, and somehow they still don't seem to have this right, nor do they have the telemetry around who was using this API. I don't know, Paul.
I think you reach a certain size as a company, and it's like next to impossible to be able to control the abuse of your API. You think about how challenging it is for a big company like Facebook, right? And certainly we've seen this with YouTube, and you see a lot of weird stuff when you're coding these various APIs. You run into a lot of weird shit that is basically that company trying to meter and monitor and control their API, and it can go in either direction. In this case, someone was able to abuse the Facebook API. In other cases, like I can, if I had $1 for like how many times our YouTube development and sometimes production channel has been taken down, suspended, or something bad has happened because we were testing some API functionality and we triggered some kind of an alarm, right? And so this is a very, very challenging problem from a false negative, false positive perspective for a lot of organizations. And I'm not giving Facebook and Google a free pass on this, but I think once you reach those sizes, it just increases the complexity of controlling how the users behave and then even write code inside your APIs. We have in testing our own APIs had our channel banned and bad things happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, testing APIs in production versus testing APIs in a staging environment. It's funny, You see me looking through the DevOps handbook because I'm literally looking for the page that talks about, things they should be doing in gathering metrics and data. Oh, here we go. Chapter 15, for any of you listeners that work at, Facebook, Google, or otherwise, talks all about gathering good telemetry and then, making sure you do a little bit of data science on it to determine when you should be getting an alarm and when you shouldn't be getting an alarm. So in my mind, this is a situation where they probably should just be building some telemetry around their API use, right? If suddenly you see the queries per second for one particular company goes up, 10 times what it traditionally does, and then they're asking for maybe additional API utilization that they've never really used in the past. This is what machine learning and artificial intelligence and blockchain was created for, right? Like,
sure.
Just be able to track these things.
The hard part from the developer perspective is doing the full scope of testing and understanding what that is, because as the developer, you don't know what the provider is necessarily looking for and flagging as bad. You don't know what their process is because they don't tell you. Because if they told everyone, then we'd come up with ways around it. At least that's the argument, right? So you don't know, how does YouTube look for content and pull down videos? That's a huge mystery. No one's going to publish a document that says, what the rules are, because then people would look at the rules and figure out ways to get around them to put adult material on YouTube or spam or some kind of malicious activity on YouTube. The APIs are the same way, dude. I don't know what the limits are, because if you, as an attacker, you knew what the limits are, you could write code that just flew right below the limits, right? Let's say you're scraping LinkedIn, for example. If you know what all those limits are and all those controls are, you're going to just go below them. So it's hard when you're developing a legitimate application to know what's going to trigger something bad. Like when I upload that 18th video in certain kind of time frame, is that going to trigger some negative action on the provider side? You don't know that because it's not in the API documentation. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't.
That's true. I mean, and to that end, it's more of it's on the company's end to determine, what is normal use, what is machine use, and then what is an acceptable machine use versus unacceptable, right? Because humans can only input so many requests, fast.
And that goes right to companies like Distill Networks that are doing awesome bot detection. I have to, if I were to venture to guess, I would imagine the larger providers are using some kind of technology similar to Distill to do that. Distill publicizes, who their current customers are that they can talk about. But when you're at a huge company like that, like a Facebook or a Google, you're absolutely looking for bot traffic, and whether you're using a vendor or whether you're doing some stuff on your own, that depends on who the provider is. But you absolutely have to take out some of that bot traffic, and that's another problem that as you grow is going to get exponentially more difficult.
Yeah, you become a bigger target, right? So suddenly people are trying to make use of your data set.
Oh my God! Can you imagine how hard that task is at Twitter?
Yeah, right.
I mean, they're criticized for not doing a good enough job at it, but I mean, that's a huge job at Twitter is stemming off the bad use cases, and one of that is looking at what's a bot and what's not, and how do you determine that from a Twitter perspective and abuse of their API. There's maybe not so much as collecting data from it, but trying to create bogus accounts is a huge battle for Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Twitter and data aggregation, though, interestingly, I don't know if you saw this, Paul, story number 200, the if you build it, they will come section. Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Twitter are announcing a data transfer project that they've open sourced on GitHub. Don't know if you caught this at all.
No, so what does that mean, data transfer?
Yeah, so
that
what they're looking
context.
to be able to do is they're allowing you to leverage, build tools and software to extract and back up data stored in social media profiles, etc., across the cloud. So now, if it's in Google, Facebook, Twitter, or even Microsoft, it sounds like. So I don't know if that's Microsoft Teams or Microsoft. I don't maybe LinkedIn. I guess that's the only thing that I can think of that would have any sort of social media presence nowadays. But it allows you to share that data across your environment. So it's almost like your data now becomes cloud agnostic, which I mean, as a developer, that might be useful because I can then do cross-cloud assessments of data sets to see if my inputs will be valid across multiple, social media platforms, for example. But this was weird to me for two reasons. It was weird because to some extent, these companies are competitors with one another. And the other thing is Amazon's not on that list.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
Yeah, that was cool and weird all at the same time to me because I never thought any of those companies would want to work together to share data like this. Then again, they probably already have all the same data, right?
Pretty close, right?
So
you wonder there's got to be something in it for them to allow that.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? Also, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I wanted to highlight it here as well. Story number 3 under If You Build It, They Will Come was a really good piece on how health insurers are actually actively vacuuming up any public data that you present out in social media or otherwise to determine your rates. Because in this case, HIPAA doesn't allow them to do that, for medical data, but anything that you publicize up to and including that Venmo data is free game for them to start saying, okay, this person is probably going to be more expensive for us, so we can up their rate. This is a long article, Paul, but did you manage to catch any of this?
No, I think it's pretty terrible, though.
Well, I mean, didn't you speculate on just this problem on Paul Security Weekly, like, I don't know, several years ago at some point? I'm pretty sure not Kevin was involved in the conversation of, privacy and public data issues and artificial intelligence and machine learning. But
and how they relate to this, and how they relate to WAFs probably was Kevin's angle on that because he loves the WAF.
Indeed.
No, I did, and it might have been in the context of like IoT security as well.
Yeah.
And devices that report to social media that are IoT personal devices, your Fitbit tracker. My wife, actually, I bought her, this was a joke in one of my presentations a long time ago, that one year for Christmas, my wife asked for a treadmill. And so I bought her a treadmill. And then the year after that, she asked for a scale. So like I literally bought her a treadmill and a scale. But like she asked for them, like I wasn't be like, hey, I thought you could use a scale. To go with your treadmill kind of thing.
Oh man,
it's usually a bad idea. It's kind of like buying your wife the vacuum cleaner. Like don't do that. Which my wife has gotten vacuum cleaners as gifts as well, but they're the robotic kind. In any case, where was I going with this? Oh, the scale, health issues. If it reports your weight, like this, there used to be. I'm sure they still make them today. Scales that report your weight to social media, like your Twitter account. Like every day when you get on the scale, it would automatically tweet your weight, and it was a weight loss method. Like you were basically publicizing, like, I'm trying to lose weight, kind of thing. I don't know if it was effective or not, but certainly that could be used to validate your health insurance. Although, how do you validate the person's identity across social media? And then how do you validate that the data is real, right?
True. Well, and so what I imagine they're doing is a little bit of metadata scraping, a little bit of, machine learning on the language being used to determine that it's the same type of user, right? Does the person use an Oxford comma or not on a regular basis?
I mean, hopefully they're not analyzing video content. I don't know if it could be, say, non-smoker on my health insurance report, but just saying, like, for example...
Well, so they could be doing that, or they could even be doing audio scraping, right? Because that is machine readable, right?
Yeah,
it's just the intonations of your voice. So, yeah, I mean, needless to say,
these are all fake cigars being smoked on the show.
I believe it.
I'm putting that out there so that they can scrape that.
Indeed. So yeah, this was by Marshall Allen at ProPublica. It's in conjunction with NPR. I imagine it's going to be a series, believe it or not. But when I saw this, I was like, man, this is like everything Paul predicted and more, which is both scary and sad. Speaking of video analysis, by the way, Paul, I wanted to cover quickly under Learning and Tools story number 1. So this is a link to someone's Twitter page because they are going to be open sourcing this little thing that they made. But it's an individual named Abhishek Singh, and he is I believe he can't speak, so I think he's mute, but he can hear. And so obviously he would have a problem using something like an Amazon Echo because he can't speak. So he actually taught Amazon Echo to understand, or Amazon Echo Show, which is the one that can like see you with the camera.
Yeah, I have a couple of those.
Read American Sign Language.
That's pretty cool.
So he can now ask questions of his Amazon Echo, and I think he published a skill on this. To then sign to his Echo Show, which I thought was really cool. So Abhishek Singh, awesome work. I thought that this was incredible. It's Learning and Tools number 1.
Yeah, and the Echo Show's okay as long as you like run through the settings and like turn off a bunch of stuff like calling and shit like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's still kind of creepy having the camera aspect of it, but.
Well, now it's not only just a wiretap in your house, but it's a full-on video camera.
Right.
So.
Right.
But interestingly, speaking or staying with Amazon for a moment, under number 2 for Learning and Tools, this was an interesting article on someone deleting all of their old tweets to social media using AWS Lambda. I thought this was actually pretty neat because they talk through how and why they're deleting old tweets, and then also some of the code that they wrote to do just that.
Well, they're deleting old tweets because of that. The director of one of the new movies that's coming out,
Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yes, thank you. Was fired for tweets he made like 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, so interestingly, I've been sitting on this Learning and Tools article since about April because I didn't know really when to talk about it. And then this whole event with the director of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 came out, and I said, now's the perfect time to talk about this, folks, because it's happening, which is sad and at the same time poignant, I guess. But yeah,
I guess the comments he made were really bad, apparently.
Honestly, I don't know what they were.
I think it was something like promoting pedophilia or something like that, like something really bad.
Yeah, I think it was related to rape. It is. Yeah. I do not condone any of their behavior, and I think that the actions that were taken are probably appropriate. But at the same time, if you worry about things that you say on social media, maybe you shouldn't say them, or you should delete them after a certain period of time. Then again, it's been stored by the web archive or Wayback Machine somewhere at some point, right? So it's there.
I'm also concerned that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 will suck as equally as bad or worse than Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which was pretty bad.
That would be a sad day.
It would be a sad. That's the other issues aside. Just speaking about the film itself, I mean,
for our own interests, right?
They'd have to try pretty hard to make it suck more than 2, but 2 is pretty bad.
This case, we are literally the Roman crowd in what was that movie with the Gladiator. Right? So we are not entertained in this case.
I was going to say togas. Was it Animal House? Never mind.
Close. And next time I'm going to show up with a shirt that just says college on it.
That's it. There you go.
I also wanted to highlight under Learning and Tools number 3, by the way, specifically because Joe Garcia was on the show, GitRob, which steals secrets and other key information out of your GitHub public repositories, is now available in Go. So yeah, it's now faster and more malicious. So you probably should get some secrets management up in your process because people like me on bug bounties, we're going out and basically robbing all your keys and reporting that for monies, which is really nice.
And I think this is a vulnerability management tactic too. Like you should be doing that on your own, and having an alert. Like someone should get an alert in operations and security or developers that say, by the way, you just published a key to GitHub. Bad. Shame on you. Get it out.
Right. Well, it's almost too late at that point. It's like rotate it.
Yes, you have to get it out, and then you're right, Keith. You have to rotate it. Absolutely.
So I did want to cover just 2 things under food for thought really quick. The first was that in this case, there was an interesting little discussion on turning your phone to grayscale will help you fight off phone addiction if you just can't turn it off. which I thought was kind of neat because it takes away some of that visual impact that you get with modern screens today. So I thought that was cool. The last one I wanted to cover, though, Paul, before we talk about the commit strip comic, was the article by Adrian Sanabria around when to purchase a solution for your security problems. So this was a pretty cool article. I don't know if you managed to read any of it, but it came out last week. And he's got a nice little flowchart and a discussion on things you should think about when you're purchasing a solution. Did you happen to catch any of this? I know that it was a week ago now that it came out.
No, I haven't read Adrian's article yet. I know we've also talked a lot about how tall you need to be to ride the ride, is how Michael used to frame it. And they didn't like that so much because it wasn't resonating, he felt. And he said, like, when are you ready? And that's a question that we ask of vendors, is basically, so in your customers, like, how tall they need to be to ride the ride? Or when do you believe that a customer is ready for the solution? Like, what other things maybe need to be in place? And that's not always obvious. Like, sure, you could say, well, if you have a source code repository system, then you should implement something like a Black Duck or White Source or something. Like, there's obvious things, but I think the harder things to pin are based on two things, like your process, how your team works, or how your teams work together, and then like overall maturity, right? And that's a hard thing to quantify. And what I found is that if we look at the pen testing side, that they're already screening all of their clients for a maturity level, right? And making recommendations based as such. And that's not always just like an easy like checkbox, like, oh, do you have a firewall? Like, do you have this? Like, do you have, it's like, you have to ask very specific questions to ascertain the culture and the maturity level of maybe your development organization, as we talk about in this show, or just your overall security posture. We're kind of doing the same things, kind of inside baseball with the sponsors and partners that we work with. Like, what is the maturity level that allows them to have the best experience? And how does that guide them into a specific program? So to turn to the pen test thing, like if you're going to get a web app pen test, one of the maturity things is like, have you done any security testing? Have you done security awareness? Like, what are you doing? And there's a whole line of questioning to determine their maturity level. And that might then determine, like, maybe you need this solution first, maybe you need this test, and what type of testing do you need, and what should the goals and expected outcomes be of that test align with your current maturity model. So that's what this article kind of got me thinking about. And Adrian and I have had a lot of conversations around that. So he is definitely an expert in this area, and I encourage everyone to read the article.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and he goes through kind of the process of like, do you need to buy it? Do you already have an existing solution that can do, what you need, and you just haven't stopped to think about it?
Yes.
And so that was really poignant, I think. And then the other side of it as well, which was a really great discussion this past weekend. So Chad Loader, founder or one of the co-founders of Rapid7, before he departed, and he now does Habituate, I believe, had a really good kind of lengthy thread on that exact problem, which is he became a CISO, and then suddenly he realized, look, I can't even buy vulnerability management yet because we're not even ready for it. So it was interesting to kind of sit back and read that, especially someone myself that has worked in kind of the vendor space and now works in the enterprise. I can see exactly a lot of those points. Lastly, just before we jump out, we have another commit strip article. It is related to IT project estimates for both those security and, of course, developer folks out there that are thinking about, hey, we have to estimate, when we're going to get these things done, and perhaps a bit of what that feels like. So with that, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us this week for another episode of Application Security Weekly. Remember to git commit and stay classy.